Our next inductee into the Radio Hall of Fame was a real trailblazer. She kicked and clawed her way into a field that was considered boys only. I'm talking about Nancy Donnellan, a sports radio star. She was better known as the fabulous sports babe. Unfortunately, Nancy could not be here tonight. She's having some health challenges, but a close friend of hers agreed to be here to accept her award. He's a radio veteran, helped launch many careers, Glenn Beck, Brian James. Accepting on behalf of the fabulous sports babe, please welcome the legendary Gabe Hobbs.
All right, it's about time someone got up here that knew how to use these microphones so you guys could hear and maybe overcome some of the talking. But I got to tell you, very first thing, you know, this is probably the coolest thing I've ever done in my career, and I've been doing this for more years than I would like to admit, and I've gotten to do a lot of really cool things, but this may be the very coolest, and mainly because I get to induct someone into the Radio Hall of Fame who is a good friend, a true talent, and a legitimate pioneer in so many ways. Some I can't go into, some you know, some you may not, but I think a lot of you know a lot of the things that Nancy Donnellan, the fabulous sports babe, which is a great name, isn't it? I mean, she was fearless about that kind, you know, lived in the Airstream trailer, which came from her Florida roots, sort of. And, you know, it was great theater of the mind what she did. She was, again, truly a pioneering sports broadcaster, and I don't want her to ever be forgotten. She's been off the radio for a while, at least on the national scene. But you have to remember, she was the first woman to ever host a national talk radio show. And I could be wrong. She may still be the only woman who has ever hosted solo a national talk, a sports radio show. Please correct me if I'm wrong after I get off of here, but I'll start shouting out names. She was the first woman not only to host a national talk show on radio, but to host a national talk show on television in sports. She was the first human being ever to host a simulcast radio and television sports program on ESPN. Now, that's a very common thing at ESPN. Who was the one who blazed that trail? It was the fabulous sports babe. And she published a somewhat controversial book called The Babe in Boyland, about what it was like for a woman like that to come up through the ranks of a bunch of jocks, you know, trying to prove herself. She has an encyclopedic memory and knowledge of sports. And that was probably somewhat intimidating, I'm sure, to some of her coworkers. And I'm sure there are current and former ESPN executives here tonight who may not be all that thrilled with her book. She was nominated twice for a Marconi, but she lost both times. One year to some guy, Rush Limbaugh, the next year to Howard Stern. So second place to those two wasn't too bad. And then most of you know she became ill around 2000 or so. She's won 2 battles with cancer. She's had a stroke, and she's successfully coming out of a 4th health battle right now. She likes to say she decided to go on a long vacation because it was in order, so she headed south to Florida to her vacation home in Gulfport, Florida, a suburb of St. Petersburg, which is a suburb of Tampa, where she floated in her pool and hurled insults at her neighbors. And then at the neighbor's insistence, she went back to work eventually. And I represented her for a brief period when she made her comeback, and the biggest fight we had, not me and Nancy, but with stations, was I thought she was dead. Seriously, I'm not trying to be funny, and because the Babe said, this is my problem. I call people and they're like, oh my God, Nancy, you're alive? I thought you died. And so that was an interesting challenge to call people. But luckily, Chris Olivero at CBS and Mark Chernoff realized she was alive and well and back on her game and put her on CBS Radio in Tampa. I'm going to tell one quick story. I know. WNSI, Scott Shannon will know that station. It was the Q105 AM in Tampa, 1380. In the early 80s, when Nancy was doing sports talk there, the early 80s, think about that. So she's doing sports talk before a lot of people were even doing any kind of sports talk. But she's doing a sports talk with another sort of legendary guy from Tampa named Ted Webb. They were co-hosting the show, and as Ted tells the story, and Nancy has confirmed this, they're doing the show, and some sales guy walks by the window, and it's like doing one of these numbers to Nancy, like, I need to talk to you right now, through the window, and Nancy looks at Ted like, give me a minute, walks out, and Ted says all he sees is outside the window, and suddenly, wham, the sales guy goes, boom, and Nancy cold-cocked and literally knocked him out and comes back in the room, puts her headphones on, and Ted's like, a little dead air going on there. But that was Nancy. She's a fighter, and she's still fighting to this day. And I am so honored and pleased to have the privilege of assisting in the induction of Nancy Donnellan, the fabulous sports babe, into the National Radio Hall of Fame. Let's see some video.
Hey, babe, I'm a first-time caller.
Honey, you've come to the right place.
Hey, you guys, guess what? The Babe is back.
Nancy Donnellan is known to listeners as the fabulous sports babe. The Babe's career began in a city that loves its sports, Boston, on two big-time stations, WRKO AM and WEEI AM. Her knowledge, sharp wit, and aggressive controversial style made her a trailblazer.
We hate the officials right now. Somebody get us some decent officials in the NFL, please, and give me somebody who maybe is under Social Security age. Please, now you got me pissed.
In 1983, she joined WNIS AM in Tampa, and by 1989, she moved across town to WFNS AM, the market's first all-sports station.
Fabulous!
Then KJR AM in Seattle made the switch to all sports and convinced the Babe to see the West Coast. That success placed her on the radar of ESPN 3 years later when she debuted the fabulous Sports Babe show on the ESPN radio network.
I need a lock. I need an upset at 1-800-SAY-BABE.
Fabulous!
It was their first weekday program offering to stations, another pioneering accomplishment for the Babe.
Look out.
Babe, you're sassy today.
I am.
Not only that, but 300 stations said yes to the idea.
And you were very right.
Then came her critically acclaimed daily ESPN2 television show. The award-winning broadcaster went on to work at the Sports Fan Radio Network before moving back to Tampa. The fabulous sports babe. Smart, compelling, entertaining, groundbreaking, and now inducted into the Radio Hall of Fame.
And on behalf of the fabulous sports babe who's a little under the weather, I'm proud to accept this award for her.